Hello, welcome to a brief SAP Integrated Grants Management demo. Today we're going to take a look at the best practice lifecycle of SAP Grants Management. Really, it's just to understand the purpose of the ECC finance, grants, and funds ledgers, and effective integration of project systems, materials management, sales and distribution across the life of a grant. And that's really from the creation of your grant to budgeting internally and externally for it, procurement, indirect costing, billing, and reporting. Blue Marble has been implementing grants requirements specific to organizations since 1999. Yesterday tools cannot meet today's demands. So the benefits of SAP Grants Management is it helps to improve operational effectiveness, standardize and centralize project management and grant accounting processes. It eliminates manual spreadsheets. It reduces month-end processing time, increases compliance, and supports adaptability and future growth of your organization. So talking about today's challenges, we need to support some fairly restrictive grant tracking. So can a grant be budgeted and tracked to a specific GL account? Yes, SAP allows for that to happen. Can the budget be effective for a specific period of time? The parameters of your grant can be set set by your sponsor, so we can control it down to the month, up to year, or even multi-year. Can we allocate overhead expenses to a grant? SAP does allow for that, and it's contained right in the Grant Master data. Clients sometimes need to match grants, so this needs some budgeting and tracking. SAP does support this ability. Some of our employee and time and payroll expenses is considered an in-kind donation. The catch with this one is some employee time is not allowed to be charged to the grants, while others are allowable. We just need to investigate a little bit to figure it out. So for the demonstration today, we're going to look at funds management budget posting, followed by consumption tracking. We'll show a grant in GM, and this is going to show us how GM integrates to sales and distribution or billing, supports the billing process for reimbursable grants requirements. We'll check out grant budgeting and cost sharing, and this just shows that GM and FM budgeting is used to meet both external sponsor and internal budgeting requirements, even if they have differing fiscal years. We'll briefly show you the availability control options for tracking your budget and monitoring your active budgets. I will show a purchase order with multi-funding sources, and this will just see how a line item can be automatically split at the time the user enters the purchase order or internal order, and it does it for internal and external funds as well as tracking against your budget consumption. We'll show indirect cost calculation, so we'll see an auto posting per rates and relationships managed on our Grant Master record. We'll show sponsor billing, see how revenue is recognized, and open receivables posted to sponsors via resource-related billing. And then finally, we'll finish off by looking at some ECC grants reporting with a couple of standard grants that we like to offer as great reports for clients. So your organization wins an award or grant from a state agency, so you need to budget the grant per the sponsor's external requirements, but you also want to budget for your organization's internal requirements, such as cost sharing. So SAP FM, or Funds Management Budgeting, is where you'll enter your budget in ECC FM to meet all of your internal requirements. One of the controls that we have for budgets, both in FM and GM, is we have a budget limit availability control. So what it does is when you exceed your limited budgets during a funds reservation, a trigger or a warning, even a hard stop is set up in ECC. And it's all controlled per requirements, and each grant can be different. So if we look at our Grant Master record, we can do our cost sharing. We set up all our information on our cost sharing tab on our Grant Master record. And the reason I'm showing you this screenshot first is because the system I'm going to show you doesn't have the cost sharing tab active, but it is available and you can set it up on your Grant Master record. So this is just showing us that you can cost share by an internal fund set to 10% for some combinations of sponsored programs or sponsored classes, which are also set up in the system. Let's go take a look at the rest of our Grant Master data. So our grant master data is all maintained per our sponsor's requirements. So we have our grant types. Those can be set up internally depending on what kind of grants you deal with. We have our sponsors, just general master data information here. We've got our currency, our descriptions, validity dates. And as we roll through the tabs, different information can be recorded and customized in accordance to what your internal needs need to meet and what the sponsor requirements are requesting. So if we move over to our budgeting tab, this is where the grant fiscal year and split fiscal year is set up. So maybe your grant fiscal year varies from the company code fiscal year. What we can see here is, maybe you have a July to June and then a January to December. So this is where that would be recorded. For billing, this is where the integration with the billing module happens. Right here, we'll look at a slide in just a minute that shows some more in-depth billing. We don't have any billing set up on this client, so we just have a manual billing rule. So we're not actually seeing the integration here. We'll show it to you on a slide here very shortly. The Dimensions tab is quite possibly the most important tab on your grant master data. This is where you have your financing sources, your sponsored programs, and your sponsored classes. So this is where you record your funds, internal and external, your sponsored programs, which might be associated with the grant, and your sponsored classes, which might be associated with the grant. Lastly, we do have our overhead cost limits and our overhead IDC. So this is where you would set up your overhead rules for your indirect cost share. That brings us back to our cost share tab. We're going to switch over. So the GMSD integration, this is that billing tab that I was just showing you where we just had a manual billing rule set up. So if we do have the billing integration, upon the status change of your award, so when you change your grant to actual award status, so an active award, a sales order is automatically created in sales and distribution, and it's all based on your resource-related billing. So bringing back to the grant fiscal year, maybe you have a fiscal year on the sponsor that is January to December, and your organization has a fiscal year of July to June. In the grant budget, you can see the breakout of the fiscal year, the funds, and even commitment items, which we also consider GLs. What we're looking at here is we've got our sponsor's budget, and we need to distribute our internal budget to our sponsor's budget. So the sponsor relevant budget is this upper one that you see GM on, so that would be the external view. And then we've got our internal view, our FM budget. If the FM budget has been previously set up, you'll get your numbers added in here. If not, you can set it up here. Simply click a button, this icon right here, and it distributes what you've set up into that external, the sponsors related perspective. So let's go ahead and say that you have a budget that's set up. We've got our grant set up, and we've got our budget for our internal setup. Here, let's go ahead and make a PO and see that the funding is automatically split. So what we did is we would set this up in our grant master record as well with our derivation rules. This helps our users have less data entry and have more flexibility on what level of control your organization needs. So we would come in here to our cost sharing rule and our cost sharing tab. This is where we would set it up on our grant master data. We'd set up a few derivation rules which work in the background. And as a user is filling out a PO, when they fill in their line item data, when they hit enter, it's distributed down onto what we call our item detail view. So in your purchase order or your internal order, we can plug it in so you have that automatic split happening. So there's fewer strokes, keystrokes entered by your user, and you're actually they have less ability to make a mistake because the information is driven from that grant master record. So they're not reliant on remembering what the cost share is, and they don't have to double check to apply it. So with our indirect cost calculation, we can process indirect costs by running a program. So after we've done all our procurement, we can find our billable overhead expenses, and we can see that up here in our line 1. And then we can have our recovery to our internal fund, which would show our revenue in line 2 here. And then we've got our cash balancing entries in line 3 and 4. And what you can see down here, if you look at this screen, we did look at our overhead with our IDC, our overhead cost rule, our IDC rules. So that's where it's set up on the grant master data. Again, it eliminates the ability for the users to make mistakes, and it also eliminates a lot of work for them as they're working through it. So after that's done, you can execute resource-related billing automatically to generate an invoice to a sponsor in compliance with their requirements. So it's heavily integrated with your grant. Lastly, we have our revenue postings. So we can see here that our 3 line items match the number of line items in our billing document. The first item is the open item posted to the sponsor and customer. The rest are showing reflecting on our revenue accounts. So now we'll jump in and we'll take a look at a couple of reports. This is a Grant Master Data Index report. What this is this has all of your data from your Grant Master information. Anything you apply to those tabs can be recorded and retrieved here. So if you need some overhead site and don't want to go to grants individually, or maybe you just want to see it on a layout like this to make sure that you have all of your needed information on the grant in order to, maybe move it to an award status. This is a great report to look at that. Make sure that everything is being applied in accordance to your sponsor's requirements. Another great report we like to use is a grants management line item display. This is a very versatile report. You can run it for a range of grants. You can run it by your grants, your funds, budget availability, current, you can run it down to the transaction currency on whatever you've applied to your grant. Lastly, one of our favorite reports is the GM ABC Overview Report. So this is the availability control report. So what's available in your budget, and this one is from the GM view, so it's from your external or your sponsor's perspective. So this is a really great report to track the consumption of the budget from an external view. So what we just did is we looked at our funds management budget posting. That's where we got a grant. Our company has been issued a grant and we need to set it up. So we went and we set it up on our funds management side for our budgeting. And we showed the grant in GM and the integration to our billing document and showed how it does support the reimbursable grant requirements. Grant budgeting and cost sharing. We looked at how GM and FM budgeting is used to meet both your internal and external requirements. And then we showed you the availability control options, which is just your budget tracking, your consumption tracking. We showed a purchase order with the multi-funded sources, and we showed how the items can be automatically split in time of entry for internal and external funds as well as budget consumption. That's driven by our derivation rules and the master data on our grants. We showed our indirect cost calculation program to see how an automatic posting per rates and relationship were managed and how they're managed on the grant master record and can be individual to each grant. We showed our sponsor billing to see how the revenue is recognized and open receivables are posted to the sponsors via our resource-related billing. And we finished with some standard SAP reports that we'd like to recommend. If you have any more information or need any more information and would like a more in-depth discussion on SAP Grants Management, please contact Blue Marble Consulting via any of the information below. Thank you.